If you've ever felt like the world you're living in has unspoken rules and expectations of you that don't fit your expectations, you're going to love today's show. We're diving deep, talking about accessing our inner strength to shake up cultural norms, as well as our own lifelong patterns, so we can create value-centered solutions. Ready to step out of the chaos and into epic co-creation with your life? Come on in. Welcome to Transforming Millions, where women leaders get real about what it really takes to make world-changing impact without life-sucking consequences. Today's guest is a coach and coach instructor who specializes in brain health and is mama to a one-year-old daughter. Her postpartum experience inspired her to discover her true passion and purpose, which is to be a catalyst for mamas to step out of surviving and into thriving. Through coaching, brain health, and nervous system regulation, including physical, mental, and spiritual practices, she lovingly guides women out of chaos and into epic co-creation with their lives. Sarah hosts her podcast titled Mama Brain to create a space of profound belonging, learning, and growth so that all mamas can discover the truth of who they are and what they're capable of. I am so happy to welcome today Sarah McErlean. Sarah, we're so happy to have you here. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation to unfold and to be here on Transforming Millions. Thank you.
Yes, me as well. So tell us a little about you, about how you got here, though. We said a little in the bio about how your podcast has been inspired by your postpartum experience as well. But tell us a little about how you got into coaching and how you've really tapped into this purpose of helping women create epic co-creation of their lives.
Oh my gosh. So I feel like my story is really one of those ones where life could never have predicted that I would be here right now. And everything that I have done up until this moment has led here. And it's a bit of an adventure. But what I will say is I got into coaching when I worked at a recovery facility. And we really specialized in this holistic idea of recovery around brain health. And I was introduced to becoming a coach and didn't know anything about what that actually meant. So I went on the journey of becoming a coach. And through that journey, I think one of the biggest things that we always say at the school is, like, this is not for the faint of heart. Like, hold on, because that experience into becoming a coach is just the most epic transformation that you can undergo. And I was definitely one of those people. I early on got a coach who I regard as one of the best coaches that's available out there. And discovered a whole lot about my life and, patterns and fears and all of those things. Fast forward to, I just over a year and a half ago, and I had my daughter, and there was something about that experience that connected me so deeply to what it meant to really lead her by example and to become that example for her. And what I found in that was it asked me to finally shift a lot of the patterns and behaviors and things that I was experiencing in my life that I was still a little hesitant and fearful to really fully grow through. When I looked around at the world, I want her to live in a world where she can create whatever life she wants and she gets to be exactly who she is, right? And when I had my experience early on postpartum, what I discovered was my world is not set up for women to do that, right? There was a lot of really strange things that happened. And I think because I became a mom later in life, when I looked back and when my friends and my family would have these experiences years and years ahead of me, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? When I became a mom, it all became so clear to me that this culture that we live in, for most of us and many of us, is not designed for women to thrive through the child, rearing years, right? And I'm the type of person that I'm not okay with with that. I feel like everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And when I became a mom, I was like, oh my God, we are literally here to create. And as a coach and as someone who has always chosen to live on my own terms, I wasn't about to let the expectations of society dictate how I was going to live my life. I wanted to be in just like epic co-creation with my life. And so I started practicing that on my own. And as I started having more conversations with moms, it was like, I'm not alone. There are other women in the world who feel the same way. And they just feel stuck. They feel like there's nothing they can do. So I decided to take all of my skills and my experience and put it out there in the world in a way that would help other women.
Amazing. So what are some of the specific, like are there any specific stories of anything that come to mind right away of what either things you've experienced yourself or things you've helped some of your clients with that had you just go, how is this even the way this is right now? And shifting from there.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, I've got a billion stories of this. One of the biggest things that stood out to me was before we had our daughter, my partner and I both, independent adults in a relationship together in our 40s, right? And, so we had this joint relationship. We shared our home and our animals, but for the most part, like he had his responsibilities and I had mine. And as soon as Hayden was born, it was like all of a sudden everything was on me. It was like I was responsible for his schedule and mine and Hayden's and the family schedule, right? I was responsible for making sure the house ran smoothly. I was responsible for, if we made social plans, making sure that everybody was like on ready to go. And he was still living in that space of like he's getting himself ready and away he goes, right? And if people wanted to come over, it was like on me whether or not that happened. And if a family event, if we were invited to something, it was on me on as to like whether or not that happened. And on one hand, I understood it because I was postpartum and I was a new mom and like my needs were just different. So on one hand, I understood it from that, but it just felt like a whole lot fell on me. And it created a lot of chaos for me because other people started putting those expectations on. His family's messaging me saying, well, what about this, this, and this? And I was the one who had to say, like, no, we don't need any more clothes. Like, we literally don't need any more clothes. And I was the one who had to set boundaries and do those things. And so it was really about learning to use my voice. And learning to be in relationship with Brett on a whole other level, right? And in order to do that, I really had to step out of the chaos, really like just step back and just observe what was happening around me. And once I was able to see it more clearly in all of the different environments that I was experiencing it, I could start to create something different.
Yeah. How did the conversations go about that as you started to uncover that? You mentioned using your voice, learning you needed to use your voice. So tell us a little about how that went initially.
It was actually Brett's always been really supportive. He's the type of person that if I say I really need to talk, he will literally put everything away. He'll turn the TV off even if he's watching football, and he will sit down and he will be present. So he has always been really good about being just an awesome listener. But what I actually found very surprising was I got more pushback from women in my world. It was like this very interesting sense of like judgment when I would set a boundary or say no. And, this sense of like, I was doing things so differently than what all the women in my environment had done because they just jumped into the chaos and served it. And I was saying, I'm not okay with this. I want something different. And what I see when I look back on it was some of this resistance that it was met with, and certainly the judgment that I was feeling and experiencing. I think it was like one of those things where people go, oh, well, they almost start to feel a little bit of judgment because, well, why is she able to do this and I wasn't, right?
Mhm.
In some ways, and in some ways, it's just like a belief system in our culture that this is just what you do as a woman. So I don't understand why you would even want to change that, right? So that was actually the most surprising thing for me, was the amount of resistance that it was met with from women.
Hmm. So what do you find now as you're working with women who do want to create something different? How does the beginning of that process usually start out? Is there resistance early on to that, or do you find the people you work with are the ones who clearly want to create something new?
I think I tend to draw somebody who, deep down inside of them, they know they want a different life
Mhm.
and they may not see the way. And for me, I think the biggest thing is just like being in a profound space of love with another human. And I know that was something that I missed on my journey, was just literally having another woman sit with me and just love me through what I was going through.
Mhm.
And so that's the first thing that I bring. Like there is absolutely a sacred space of whatever their journey is in that moment. There's absolutely no judgment, and it is nothing but, I will meet you with love and, walk with you on this journey. And I think that's like the superpower that I really learned to tap into. And I think that's one of the gifts that becoming a mother gave me, is I've always been a very loving person, but I also hid that for a really long time in my life. And
Mm.
so again, like, becoming a mother has challenged me to grow in the ways that I feel like, I really am meant to grow in this moment. And then I'm able to utilize that in the world to help others. And that's, I mean, what a gift.
Yeah. I've definitely found a lot of that myself. It's funny, even things like patience. I never really thought of myself as a patient person at all. Like, I want everything now, I want it now, and I want it now, and don't make me wait, and you're wasting my time, and let's move on already. And yeah, I definitely have found motherhood has helped me tap into things like that that I didn't even know that I had within me sometimes. That, there are times when I'm in the midst of doing 18,000 different things and one of my kids needs my attention for something, and especially if it's something deeply emotional or challenging that they're going through, it's like being able to almost feel like you can flip that switch to be like, okay, I'm here, I'm present, how can I be here for you? But at the same time, also, like, I get what you were saying too about with boundaries. We don't necessarily want to every second of every day be putting everything that we have going on or that we need aside to essentially serve the little humans in our lives. So finding that balance is always, I think, very interesting. When my youngest was maybe 5, this may sound horrible, maybe I shouldn't admit to this in a public forum, but I started locking my bedroom door because she would just come in at all hours and be like, used to say to her, if it's not an emergency, if it's not a 911 emergency that you need the police or an ambulance for, do not knock on my door or come in until whatever time. And maybe she was 6 by then. She was old enough, she understood time, and she had enough self-control that she could have done it. But I found she kept coming in. And so I gave her a couple warnings. I said, look, if this keeps happening, I'm going to end up locking the door so you can't get in. And eventually I did. But she learned then after that, because I mean, she'd come in at like 4:30 in the morning and then I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep and I'd be exhausted the rest of the day. And so at some point it was like, all right, we gotta set some boundaries and tap into those different ways of being that they need of us.
I think you raised like a really good point in what you were just sharing, though, right? Because I'm the type of person that, prior to having my daughter, and even now, I like to do a million things, right? I have that ADHD brain, right?
Mhm.
Where I thrive in that. And I think that's also why I so easily got sucked into the chaos and this belief system that I can do everything, right? And it was, not only it felt like this like outside expectation, but this internal expectation that I should be able to do everything. But what that did was, like, in that moment that you said with your daughter, where you were able to just like step back and go, okay, I'm here for you, right?
Mhm.
Even though I have all this stuff going on. I think that that's also one of the things um, that can influence us, is this, like, when we're able to get really clear about what it is that we want to create in our lives and what really matters, we can start to set boundaries around the things that don't serve us, so that in moments when our children are saying, I need you, you can totally be present. Because I can say with full honesty, when I have so much going on that isn't value centered,
Mhm.
right? And I'm taking on more than I should because of either my own internal expectations or the expectations that I'm feeling for others, I cannot show up for my daughter the same way, right? There's a lot more distractibility that happens. And when I get lost in the doing, I forget about the being, right? And at the end of the day, who I'm being is for me, how good it feels to be able to go, I'm totally with you,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's with my daughter or whether it's with Brett or whether it's with the women that I coach, right? I don't have to worry about all that other stuff right now. I can be with you. And um, so I love that you were able to do that and create that with your daughter, because it's so important. And it's the first thing I find that gets lost.
Yes, absolutely. I love how you brought up that element too, though, of being clear on what you really want and what really matters. And that's always like the first thing I start with my clients with, as well as it's like very first thing. Okay, what is it that you really want? What do you want your life to be like? What do you want? I do a lot of business coaching as well, so a lot of times it's the business too, but I always start with, what do you want your life to be like? And then let's figure out how this business can support that, not the other way around. But your life as a whole, of what are the things that really matter to you, and what are the things you value, and what are the things you want to be able to unquestionably do, and not have other things that are maybe less important seem like higher and more urgent priority in that moment. And so to be able to ground into that, I think, is just a complete and total game changer for people. And one of the questions that I always kind of prompt my clients with is this just sort of this inner question of, is this moving me toward what I want or away from it? As
Mhm.
simple as that. And like in that moment with my daughter, okay, I want that close connection with her. I want her to know she can count on me and that I'm there for her when she needs me and she can trust me. And so, if I'm like, I got too much going on right now, you're going to have to take a number, that's not in line with what I want. So it's always kind of being clear of those things and being able to remember and tap back into those when we need to.
And you raise like a couple of really interesting things. One is like, I find the first time I ask somebody, well, what do you want? I would say probably 99% of the time I get, I don't know. I don't know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
from
People are like, they've never even thought of it before, been asked before. Yeah.
and here's what's interesting though, right? Like I always say, like from a brain perspective, right? When we look at your brain, when you have so much going on, you literally don't have the capacity to consider that, right? So that creative, that expressive part of our brain,
Mhm.
when we have too much and we're overwhelmed, we're in a stress state. And that stress state, our brains can't tell the difference between whether, okay, is this life or death stress, or
Mhm.
is this just like, real life stress, right? Like, what is it? It can't tell that difference. And the reality is, we're very like primal beings still. And our brain was not hardwired to be like running from a tiger and then going, what would I like to do with my life? Right. So it makes complete sense why so many of us have such a hard time connecting to what we really want. And then, like, a super funny story though about this and how that happens, and growth is, I part of what I truly believe is we need to have value centered lives. So understanding what our values really are and creating a life from that, right? So all my decisions come now from this value centered space. And recently, we're getting into the holidays here, and Brett works longer and longer hours, and Hayden's, a toddler, and I'm so excited to experience this with her, but it means more on my to-do list coming up to the holidays and everything else, right? So I realized that means that I had to give up some stuff. And I went into the clinic where I have clinic hours, and I said, I'm going to have to cut back my hours for November and December because I need to be home with my daughter. I need to be able to accommodate for all the extra stuff from holiday. And I need to be able to support Brett because he's going to be working longer hours. Right. So I need to be present. And that's what's important to me. Being there for my family is really important for me. and being present in that journey and joyful in the experience, and not just like running from one thing to the next by adding more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in, I had this conversation, and that was met with some resistance. And it was like, well, what about all your clients and how is this going to work? And so what I immediately did was went into one of my patterns, which is like, okay, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make this right. This is going to be a win-win. And I ended up coming with a solution, which was I will just do all those extra clients from home. And then I got home and I went, what the heck did I just do? I didn't actually take anything off my plate. I kept everything. And in fact, I made it even more challenging, because now I'm going through my head. I'm driving home from work and I'm going, well, how am I going to get daycare? How's this going to work? What's the schedule going to be like? Because I don't know what Brett's schedule is like. And I stepped back and I went, wow, right? That's how it happens. Is I have this like inner people pleaser,
Mm-hmm.
right? This inner overachiever. And when I set boundaries that really meant something to me and they were met with resistance, I jumped into like fixing everything and compromising myself.
Mm-hmm.
And what that afforded me the ability to do was to learn that if I'm going to make value-centered decisions, I also need to make value-centered solutions, right? And take that time to like step back and connect. And that's one of those like transformative moments for me, because I saw, even though I'm hyper aware of this and I'm in the practice of this, how easily that can happen in moments.
Yeah. I can see that as a meme that could go viral. If I'm going to make value-centered decisions, if I'm going to make value-centered decisions, I have to make value-centered solutions. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's so much what we do, though. You mentioned the pattern that you go into and the being the people pleaser. And it's like, just like you said, we're basically still, I mean, I don't think you use the word cavemen, but essentially we're still cavemen. And so those same drivers of like trying to not get kicked out of the cave, those things we learned as kids, little kids, many times, most of us, it's like all that stuff just keeps coming up, and it comes up every time. I feel like it comes up every time we're challenged or we're squeezed or we're pushed in any way. It's like we go right back into it. And I think of it like a reflex, almost like, if a doctor taps your knee and your leg kicks out, it's like those same things just kick in like a reflex. And good for you. Kudos to you for having the awareness around it. It maybe took until the drive home, but good thing it only took until the drive home and not till the end of the holidays going, oh my gosh, what did I do to myself?
Yeah. And it's interesting because looking at it from this perspective, right? Like, also made me really have a profound amount of empathy. So the person that schedules at work, she's also a mom. She's got 2 kids. She's so busy. And she's one of those people that is like sucked into the chaos. And she hasn't found the space for herself to step out of it. And so when I came home, I realized I so deeply connected to like her level of stress and her experience in this, that I was like, let me just like make this easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, what I realized is this whole thing that I truly believe is like, if we want to change the world, we have to lead by example,
Mm-hmm.
right? How we live our life and who we choose to be is what's going to actually change the world, and not just talking about it. And when I thought about revisiting the conversation, I thought, well, what is like the most loving thing I can do for this human? And so the plan with this conversation is literally to like bring her tea and sit down and acknowledge where she's at, and also just share with her where I'm at and connect with her, and lovingly reestablish that boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a thought on that and it just popped out of my head, but it's something around how we, maybe it'll come back.
It usually does. It usually comes back.
It'll come back tomorrow.
It might be tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So, I know what I was going to say. Yeah. I think it's so easy sometimes for us to also go to, because I'm sure you care very much and love your clients as well. And I think it's so easy for those of us who are wanting to do things like change the world and make an impact, and we so believe in and are so passionate about what we're doing, that it's easy to think like, well, I can't just abandon them. I mean, it's the holidays. They might need more help and more support as well. But I think it's also like we need to remind ourselves, okay, but we're not like supporting all 8 billion people on the planet, and there's going to be some that we're missing anyway.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
we can't get to them all, and we can't get to any of them if we're burned out and fried and saying this sucks and I'm going to quit completely because it's so awful and I can't, it's not sustainable anymore. Sustainability, I think, is the big thing that a lot of us miss when we get so driven on like, but I got to do this and I want to do this. And then I feel like I need to do this. And now crap, how do I not do this or not do it as much? And it just becomes this like almost like a trap sometimes.
One of the things that I've realized too is like, for me, when I overcommit, I feel it right away in my body, right?
Mm,
Like I can just feel that I'm agreeing to something that I don't want to agree to. And what I've also found is like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't end up going well, right? Like either I have resistance that day, so I just don't feel good in the moment. And when I think about, you were talking about like the clients and the people, and like I'm cutting back a little bit. And what I realized it for me, and a huge shift for me, because I'm like all about quantity, right?
mm,
Like jam it all in, quantity, quantity, is this shift to like quality. So for me, my clients may not get to see me every week for those 2 months, but when I am with them, I am giving them 100% in a way that is completely different than what I would be able to give them if I just continued to do more and more and more and more. I'd be so distracted, right? And who doesn't need more presence from another human at what could, for many of us, become the busiest time of year, right? Who doesn't need more presence? And if I can be more present in my life, then I know I can be present in the lives of others in a way that, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, the holiday season, it's like a blink of an eye. And I started celebrating, Hallmark Channel started yesterday. So I'm like singing Christmas carols to my daughter. We're playing with Rudolph this morning, right? But it will pass in a blink of an eye. And I truly believe that, that's part of life, that the things that mean the most seem to happen so quickly. But also, I think part of the reason that things happen so quickly sometimes is because we're not totally present.
yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when you've got a 1.5-year-old or, any little ones that are still excited about and into the holidays, you got to milk that for everything you can. Because that whole thing goes in the blink of an eye. I can say that as having my youngest, who's now 16 and a half. And yeah, our older ones are in their later 20s now. So I'm like, okay, now I'm just waiting on the grandbabies to come around. Not yet, maybe, but when they do.
Yeah. When they do, you will be there. You
Yes.
will be there.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So tell us a little about Mama Brain. Tell us about your show, Mama Brain, and what your goals or your hopes or your objectives are for that show.
So this is really interesting because I made the comment earlier, but you're learning to use my voice. So one of my patterns is, I have the core fears of I'm not enough and I don't matter. And one of my patterns when I'm experiencing that fear is like I shut down and I just stop communicating. And I did that after my daughter was born. I really felt like I became this like insignificant human, even though to my daughter I was the most significant human, right? But to everyone else it was like I didn't exist anymore, right? And I stopped using my voice, and I know that contributed to like a lot of the postpartum fog and some feeling like really intense feelings of like feeling so lonely throughout that phase. And so what I noticed was when I started having really authentic, deep conversations with other mothers, it was like when I held that space and I was able to do that, things were coming out that was like very different than my early experience where everyone was just kind of telling me what to do. And like there was they didn't really feel like anyone was listening and there was no connection. And everybody was just like, suck it up and do it, right? Like this is just the way it is. What I found was when I was able to engage and use my voice, other women started sharing like their real vulnerable experiences. And it made me feel so much more connected. And what I noticed was it made them also feel like they weren't alone in whatever season of motherhood they were in. And so the idea of Mama Brain was I have this like interesting perspective on the world because as people share with me, I hear what's going on in their brain. And then I'm able through coaching to see how that's translating into their lives. But I also have a superpower of being able to truly see what I think is like the other person's soul. Like no matter how much someone might be struggling or how little they may believe in themselves or how like stuck they may feel, no matter what, throughout my life, I have always seen like the greatest possibility in another human. And I think that's probably why I got into coaching, is to also be a mirror for that, right? For other people to see that. So I started having these conversations with people, and my coach had brought up this idea of podcasting to me probably 5 years ago. And I was like, not me. I don't matter. What are you talking about? I don't have a voice. But when I actually started engaging in these conversations, it became really abundantly clear that I would love to have a space where women could share their stories, and it would allow greater connection. Also, like when we can understand what's going on, right? If we can understand the changes in our brain, understand what we're experiencing. I can't tell you how many times when I'm working with a client and I say, well, hold on 1 second, let me just explain from a brain perspective, here's what happens. Or from a somatic response in your nervous system, here's what's going on. People go, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And they feel like validated and free of this like shame that they've been carrying around because they're not doing the thing they think they should be doing. And so the podcast is really about allowing the space for women to share, bringing on experts. Like there's some amazing people in this world who can help illuminate so much of what mothers go through. I know like when I was on social media, finding so many like women, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually a thing. It's not just me. And then they have these other skills and experience. And so the ultimate goal of this is to create this space of like profound belonging and to learn more about who we are as women and how motherhood informs us very differently, and provide the resources so we can step out of the chaos and into what I like to call epic co-creation with our lives, right? Because I really and truly believe that women are literally here to create. That's why we're here, right? We're here to create. So why would we be anything other than creators in our life, right? And for me, I see this in a way because it's going to affect every generation that comes after us, or little ones that are looking up to us. It's going to change their life. My daughter's life is actively receiving greater possibility every single moment that I choose to step into my truth and choose to step into my possibility and what I'm capable of. So that's what the podcast is about. It's about connection, belonging, understanding, and then the resources to actually go out in the world and do that. And it's tied to my coaching business, because this is what I'm really passionate about. Because when we can change the life of even just like one mother, even just one mother, if we can step into this together, well, there's a whole other generation that immediately is influenced.
Yeah.
And then the ripple effect. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. What an awesome contribution you're making to the world. Thank you for that. I can't wait to hear. So if you'd like to learn more about Sarah and her podcast, Mama Brain, check out her Instagram at Coach Sarah Mac. That's Sarah with an H. And so it's Coach SARAHMAC. And her podcast, Mama Brain, is available in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And Sarah has also graciously offered a free gift to our listeners and viewers called A Moment of Peace. It's a moment of peace meditation that is an amazing nervous system regulator. And you can simply PM, private message Sarah on Instagram, the word peace, to get your copy, and she'll send that to you. Sarah, it has been so amazing having you here today. Thank you so much for being part of our show and for the work you're doing in the world and getting Mama Brain out there to help so many others. I wish you all the best and just amazing continued success.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Thank you for sharing yourself and your story and the amazing work that you're doing in the world, transforming millions. I appreciate you.
You too. If you'd like to learn more about how you can unleash your and your organization's power to profitably and sustainably make the full impact that you know you're here to make, and to do it in ways that work for you without life-sucking consequences, go to transformingmillions.com to sign up for our free masterclass and to be among the first to know about our live coaching and connection event coming soon. See you next time.